My spotlight guest tonight shares Celine's struggles. Robyn Cook lived with the debilitating symptoms associated with stiff person syndrome for years before receiving treatment that allowed her to reclaim her life. For more on what it's like to live with this rare condition, Robyn joins me now from North Bay, Ontario. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
You know, we have heard from Celine Dion in great detail what this was like for her. Describe for us what it was like for you.
What it was like for me? Well, stiff person syndrome can vary on a degree of spectrum. And for myself personally, I went from in my mid-30s, I went from very high functioning in a career, great quality of life, and very quickly deteriorated fast. And some of my first symptoms were in regards to a quick decline in weight loss unintentionally, decline in executive function, cognitive function, and obviously a very high muscle tone. And I can specifically remember back, I'm actually a saxophonist with the 22 Wing Military Band, and I was playing in a concert in 2012 for Armed Forces Day. And during that concert, there was a lot of commotion going on, airplanes flying around, a lot of noise. And one of the biggest things I remember was the inability to be able to get my breath. It felt like a python was squeezing my chest. I wasn't able to get the breath that I would normally be able to project out through that horn and play. And also the weight of the horn felt 3 to 4 times heavier. So it was, extreme pain through my neck, my shoulders, my back. And when I made it through and made it back to work that day, it was within minutes that I sat down at my office desk that my full torso went into spasm, my full neck, my full jaw went into spasm.
Wow.
I was essentially, barely able to open my mouth enough to call for help. I had to email somebody in order to get somebody to pick me up and take me home. And that was my last day of work in 2012.
Oh, wow.
At that time.
And so, did you go through this same struggle trying to get diagnosed? And also, what changed in your life from, before the onset of stiff person syndrome compared to when you were diagnosed?
Yes, so they say the average of time of diagnosis for stiff person syndrome is 7 to 20 years.
Wow.
I guess I could say 5 to 7 years. I guess I could say I do feel fortunate that it did take 5 years, even though 5 years does seem like a very, very long time. It was a very isolating time for me in the sense of that I progressively got worse and worse to the point where, you start to not want to go anywhere. You see the world happening around you. You can't do the activities that everybody else is doing and fear that your body may go into spasm. And then people will be wondering what's going on, and you won't even be able to tell them what's going on because you don't actually even know what's going on. So it's, becomes a very lonely environment and not a lot of, not unintentional, but not a lot of empathy, because it's very hard for people to understand what's happening when you don't even know what's understanding yourself. So when I got to my worst point, I got to the point where I went from a cane to a walker and into a wheelchair. And at that point, I was even fearful to be at home alone, because I would be going into back-arching spasms that could last 10, 20 minutes. And you could only take so much conventional therapy at home to try to release these spasms, where I would have to be rushed to the hospital, where it was safe to take more medication in order to release these spasms on a regular basis.
This must have been so difficult for your family as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you go from one day being fully independent to the next day being, having to rely on everybody for everything.
So Robyn, once you finally were diagnosed, you then received experimental stem cell treatment for this. What was your experience like going through that treatment, and how effective was it?
Yes, so I was very fortunate to be connected with a neurologist at the Ottawa Hospital, and also to be recommended for an experimental stem cell transplant. I was the 5th person in Canada to undergo this specific, it's called an autologous hematopoietic stem cell transplant for stiff person syndrome. And one of the words that does resonate with me still today was one of the specialists had said to me that, you need to be sick enough to get it, but also healthy enough to survive it. Because it really is that last stop when everything else has failed. And the process of going through the stem cell transplant, where they harvest my own stem cells, they clean them, purify them, they use very strong chemo to essentially destroy my immune system that was attacking my body. And once that's done, they reintroduce my clean, purified, good stem cells. And that essentially was called my new birthday. That was the reboot of my new immune system.
Wow.
On that day. So essentially, I ended up with a disease-free immune system, but still a very long recovery to go, as I was very immune compromised. I had to rebuild that immune system from scratch. And, today I'm just a little over 7 years old, immune system wise.
Yeah. I wonder, what you think Celine Dion has done being so open about this and what it has done to her life in terms of raising awareness about stiff person syndrome.
I think it's a difficult decision to make because it does put yourself in a very vulnerable position in terms of everybody knowing what is going on with yourself personally. In terms of every patient that lives with stiff person syndrome, I think has brought great awareness to the disease itself. I mean, any rare disease is very difficult. I can say myself personally, I would always be hesitant to even say the word stiff person syndrome because I would get that blank stare. I would get that feeling of, did that really happen? Is this really a thing? Are you making this up? And since Celine did indicate that she did have stiff person syndrome, I've noticed that dynamic has actually changed. So actually very shortly after she made the announcement over social media, I received phone calls and texts from people that I least expected saying, hey, I've heard this. I think this is what you have. Can you now tell me about it? I've noticed when I have had to go to the ER for a few minor things that when I have to give my medical history, it's not kind of that, again, just dismissive of I don't really know what that is. It's now more inquisitive. Oh, I've heard about that. Oh, tell me more about that. Oh, this is very interesting. And I think it will bring a lot of awareness, hopefully a lot more research to the disorder, and hopefully with the aim of having people, patients diagnosed more quickly so that they can get the treatments faster, so that they can have a better quality of life and not get to the point where I had to get, where my last stop was a stem cell transplant.
Robyn, wish I could talk to you longer. We are out of time, but thank you so much for coming on Canada Tonight and sharing your story and raising awareness yourself about stiff person syndrome. Appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you for having me.